Grey clouds hung low over the rolling hills at the heart of the land. Though the sun was climbing in the sky, there seemed little hope of chasing away the gloom looming overhead. An unsettling hush blanketed the forested slopes and the village below, hinting at the hardships still to come. In the last season, the rains had stopped far too early, leaving the fields cracked and the riverbeds receding day by day. Crops threatened to wither before they could bear any yield. Children brushed dried mud from empty gourds. Elders clung to their faded memories of times when water pulsed through every stream. Yet this silence was the hush before a story's thunderous climax, an omen soon to be realized by mortal and spirit alike. In Cherokee tradition, thunder spirits were not mere atmospheric phenomena. Each was believed to be alive with intention, an otherworldly messenger who roamed the sky. They carried the voice of the great mountain spirit and brought nourishing rain when hearts and minds aligned properly with the balance of nature. Among them was Adawiyiwan of the younger thunder spirits, whose curiosity overcame his inhibitions and led him on humble attempts to restore equilibrium. He soared above the mountains, searching for ways to help villagers in distress when the rains refused to come. Each time Adawi gathered the clouds and struck the drum of the heavens, swirling dark vapor across the horizon, he found that something unknown devoured his rains before they reached the ground. Electrical crackles leapt from his arms as he spread them wide, but each assault of thunder yielded only a pitiful drizzle. In turn, the parched fields remained dusty, and the forest underbrush bristled with dryness. From high in the sky, Adawahi watched the thirst of the land deepen with every passing day, and he grew worried. To the people below, dehydration and despair threatened to devolve into a famine. The spirit felt duty-bound to break the escalating cycle of dryness. "Who is taking the water from my clouds?" Adawahi murmured, more to himself than to any living being. He travelled from ridge to ridge, from horizon to horizon, trailing endless ribbons of rumbling sound in his wake. But the stark truth remained. All of his efforts were wasted, as the land stayed locked in creeping drought. Trees raised their bare, brittle branches toward him like supplicants. The once roaring waterfall by the village had been reduced to a meager trickle. Something or someone was siphoning away the very essence of his storms. In searching for answers, Adawahi drifted down from the sky one evening and ventured into the hidden caves within a massive crag, framed by old oak trees. The labyrinthine stone corridors were rumored to be the dwelling of certain spirits that lived in darkness, unseen by the eyes of mortals. Perhaps among them he might discover some clue. The stony underbelly of the land was moist with trickling rivulets drawn from the mountain's subterranean streams. Drips formed tiny pools that shimmered in torchlight, which the thunder spirit summoned by conjuring flickers of lightning from his fingertips. Beneath the earth, an unearthly pulse tugged at Adawahi's awareness. The further he walked, the more he felt the brush of a cold presence, like the hiss of a distant wind from a frigid land. Each footstep was answered by a morning echo down the corridor of stone. He noticed spirals etched into the walls, ancient carvings depicting swirling shapes that might have once represented the cyclical nature of seasons: summer, winter, storm, and snow. Rounding a corner, Adawahi stepped into a small chamber ringed by stalactites resembling icicles. An unsettling swirl of cold air rendered his spine prickly to the touch. Before him stood a shape that held all the potency of an Arctic wind, a figure draped in robes of purest white, its form translucent like winter's breath in the moonlight. Its eyes, pale as frost, fixed upon the thunder spirit with both curiosity and caution. Adawahi steadied himself, electricity dancing at his fingertips in readiness to defend against an attack, if one were to come. The white-robed entity offered a thin smile before letting out a frigid exhale. "I have heard you stumbling around in the darkness," it said. "You should be careful. Such gloom is not meant for a spirit of thunder. Adawei relaxed a fraction, though he maintained a lingering suspicion. I seek one who is stealing the water from my storms. The land suffers from a scorching drought, and this place, he glanced around, noting the crisp chill in the air, feels touched by an unnatural cold. Who are you, and why does your presence feel out of place in these mountains? The entity's voice resonated in the chamber like wind whistling through bare trees. I am Unahigilv, an old spirit of snow. Some might call me a demon, others might call me a trickster of the frozen realms. The distinction depends on who is naming me. But I assure you, I do not want your land to wither in drought. Cold can be a cleansing agent, but not a desiccating one. In truth, I too sense the dryness that plagues these hills. There is a hunger in the land that I cannot satisfy alone. Adawei's eyes narrowed. Rumors of snow spirits among the Cherokee were usually short cautionary tales. The biting cold they brought could be as lethal as it was healing. Snow purified, but it also smothered growing things. If you are not my enemy, then perhaps you can tell me what's draining the storms of their water. A flicker of sadness passed over Unahigil's expression. We share a problem. A monstrous force has awakened beneath the surface, a living thirst. Some name it Yawa Gwynjarge, the Dark Taker. It dwells in the cracks of the world and devours moisture, robbing the storms of their life-giving rains. This threat is old, older than the hills themselves. It sees no difference between thunder and snow. It leaves only dryness, feeding on any source of water or cold it can trap in its shadowy jaws. His tone softened, and though his presence remained frigid, sincerity gleamed in his eyes. I've sought to contain it, for it threatens my existence as well. Yet alone I cannot seal it away. Snow cannot hold back that which thrives on emptiness. But thunder, on the other hand, thunder might manage something else entirely. In that moment, Adawei recognized the subtle truth. The dryness menacing the land was no mere seasonal whim. A deeper malevolence was at work, preying on both water and frost. He hesitated, measuring his pride as a thunder spirit against the necessity of forging any alliance with a questionable being like a snow demon. But he could not let Earth's children suffer for his reluctance. The vines in the fields, the pine needles in the forest, all were crying out for water. The echo of mortal prayers demanded responsibility. Tell me your plan, said Adawei. If there's a way to restore balance, I will do my part. I propose a pact. Unahigilv replied. We combine your thunderous power, drawing new storms, and my frost to preserve the water before it's consumed by Yova Gvanage. If we trap the monstrous being within a shield of ice, mixed with thunder's essence, we might seal its hunger away long enough to deliver rain back to the land. Once it is contained, I suspect the proper flow of storms and snows will resume. Adawei's thoughts tumbled with caution. A pact with a snow demon was an unusual move, one frowned upon by some of his kin. Nevertheless, he extended his hand. So be it. We forge this bond for the sake of the land. Uncertainty glimmered in Unahigil's frost-filled gaze, but then he gently placed his hand in Adawei's, forging the vow. A surge of cold energy combined with the wild spark of electricity. A swirl of steam rose where ice and lightning made contact, and the newly minted alliance was sealed. They parted ways to lay the groundwork for their plan. Over the following days, Adawei soared through the skies, carefully calling upon the great mountain spirit to muster fresh clouds. He thrummed the drum of thunder, roiling dark billows across a horizon that had been clear and mercilessly bright for weeks. Crystal forks of lightning split the heavens, drawing volatile energy from the spirit realm into the physical. Meanwhile, down below, Unahigilv travelled unseen among the frigid caverns, preparing layers of frost that would anchor their trap. His presence crystallized each drip of moisture. Even swirling vapor in the air condensed into shimmering rings of glimmering ice. One evening, as the air above smelled of ozone, Adawehi glided through roiling clouds, hearing the faint humming of Yoagivne below. A mesmerizing hush enveloped the land in ghostly twilight. Faint starlight blinked overhead, nearly drowned by the swirling mass of thunderheads. Though the spirit could glimpse occasional lights from the far-flung village, he sensed that the tribe remained mostly inside, hoping for a downpour. The people were praying for the storm to finally break. Adawehi risked a moment's thought for the humans who would see this spectacle. To them, the sky's darkness might seem menacing, but it was also their last hope. The dryness in the earth had grown so severe that certain sections crumbled at the slightest touch. The men and women of the village had begun rationing water. The children's lips were cracked with thirst. Livestock suffered, moaning listlessly in the heat. If this plan failed, the entire region might slip into a famine that would claim many lives. He soared downward, gliding in arcs through the thickening gloom until he found the entrance to a hidden cleft in the earth. Bracing himself, he stepped onto the stony threshold. The difference in temperature was immediate. The chamber was icy to its core, illuminated only by a faint bluish glow emanating from walls thick with frost, courtesy of Unahigilv's work. Broken shards of light from Adawehi's crackling aura refracted in the ice, dancing along the walls in rainbow patterns. Kneeling down, he touched the ground. A heartbeat of dryness pulsed beneath the stone. Unahigilv, Adawehi called softly, his voice echoing. I have done my part. The clouds are primed, and the sky stands ready to weep. Is our trap prepared? The snow spirit emerged from the dim edges of the cavern, his face solemn. It is. I have layered sheets of ice through tunnels branching out from here, forming a ring that loops back upon itself. When you trigger the storm from above, the water will flow into this place. Yawagvanaja will come to feed on that torrent, but it will be too late for it to escape. We must seal the ring behind it with thunder and frost, caging it once and for all. Nodding, Adawi placed a palm against the nearest wall of ice. He felt an impressive cold that almost numbed even his storm-charged fingertips. Then let us not delay. The land's need is dire. They made their way deeper into the labyrinth. Each winding corridor carried the bitter sting of winter's breath. Soon the tunnel opened to a vast chamber. Shadows that shouldn't exist in ice wavered at the corners, traces of Yawagvanaja's dark presence. It hadn't fully arrived, but the chamber lay on the threshold between the known realm and the deeper subterranean mysteries. Adawehi's gaze shifted upward toward the stony roof. A circular opening in the ceiling led to the sky, perhaps a natural vent high on the mountainside. Very soon, the precious water from the storm would pour through that ragged hole. Hand in hand, Thunder Spirit and Snow Demon positioned themselves near the circle's center. From above came a muffled roar of thunder. Adawehi reached out with his awareness, felt the swirling masses of water-laden clouds overhead. With a single resonant clap, he startled them into releasing the torrent. A thunderous crash shook the mountain as lightning sparked the downpour, sending water spilling through the aperture. The rush of water churned into a waterfall that slammed into the chamber's floor, turning everything slick and chaotic. The steam rose where it collided with Unahigil's cold aura. The room glowed, illuminated by a mesmerizing interplay of watery reflections and occasional lightning flashes from the hole above. Adawehi liked to think that the watchers, those who still believed in the thunder spirits, would be outside, rejoicing in the rainfall. Yet inside the cavern, the actual battle was about to begin. A presence stirred in the swirling water. The gloom twisted around the waterfall's edges, congealing into an inky swirl. Then the swirl took form. Yawagvanaj rose like a spectre of living shadow, eyes as empty as hollow pits. It reached forward with elongated fluid limbs, greedily drawing in the water before it even hit the ground. Rivulets changed direction mid-air, siphoned into the monster's hungry maw. The hiss of its feeding was unnerving, like the sound of cloth tearing in a silent room. Beweki! Unleashed a crack of thunder. Now, Unahigilv, he shouted. The snow demon lifted his hands and exhaled a fierce breath, conjuring frigid currents of air. Sheets of ice expanded from the floor and walls, creeping toward the shadowy entity. Icy crystals started to form protective walls, trying to lock Unahigilv inside. Shrieking in fury, the monstrous presence lashed out, sending razor-sharp tendrils of darkness at the newly formed ice. Some of the columns cracked and huge shards toppled with a wet crash, but Unahigilv pressed on. "Hold it at bay!" cried the snow spirit, straining with all his might. Aduichi gathered all the electric energy at his fingertips, summoning lightning from within himself. Bright arcs sizzled and danced across his forearms. He pressed his hands against the swirling aquatic mass, letting the lightning surge and fuse with the frost. A tapestry of blue-white electricity raced across the growing ice shell, welding each fragile piece together. Under the combined power of thunder and frost, the dark shape writhed in pain. For a moment it looked as if Yoag might break free, but then the spirals of ice thickened, turning the watery gloom into lumps of freezing slush. Furious and desperate, the creature tried to condense itself into a single needle of shadow that might pierce the barrier. Dawi roared in defiance. Lightning soared from his palms, forging a final layer of crackling energy. With a howl that echoed throughout the caverns, Yawa Guanach's form froze mid-lunge, trapped in a twisted coil of black ice. The thunder spirit and the snow demon collapsed on either side of the encased monstrosity, breathing hard. Exhaustion weighed on them, and for a moment, only the drip of water could be heard, plinking off stalagmites. A few remaining droplets fell from the opening overhead, along with the echoes of the storm still raging outside. Adawei slowly stood, chest heaving, and looked over toward Unahigilv. "We did it," he said softly. In his voice sat a note of disbelief. "Our pact held against the devouring force." Panting, Unahigilv nodded. "Our parts are done here. The creature's hunger is sealed away, at least for many generations. It should allow the waters to flow again without draining them dry." They both turned to gaze upward. The fresh rain of thunder could be heard clearly now, a sign that the clouds would share their bounty over the long parched ground. However, the aftermath of containing Yawa Gvnagi's darkness left the subterranean air charged with tension. They could not remain in its presence for long. Hand in hand, the unlikely allies retraced their path through the twisting tunnels. Steam curled along the floors where the watery flow met Unahigilv's chill, while soft rumbles of thunder beckoned them back into the open air. The labyrinth's gloom gave way to the dim light of a drizzly twilight sky. As they emerged into the forest clearing near the mountain's base, rain soaked the earth in a gentle cascade. Trees that had grown brittle mere days ago now soaked up the water. Leaves quivered, pooling droplets that glistened like diamonds. The dusty underbrush was rejuvenated, and the soil began to renew its vigor. For a moment, Thunder Spirit and Snow Demon stood side by side, letting the rain dance across their hands and faces. Adawi lifted his gaze to the sky. Fresh rumbles indicated the storm's continuation. The air smelled of wet earth and pollen, a liberating aroma of renewal. Unahigilv, though composed largely of frigid essence, found something almost comforting in the warm patter of raindrops. They watched from the shelter of towering pines as villagers started to emerge from their dwellings down the slope. Children ran barefoot through puddles, giggling at each slap of water. Elders lifted their cupped hands, letting droplets trickle through their fingers as their eyes welled with tears of relief. A family knelt near the edge of a receding creek, praising the sudden flush of water that recharged their wells. The renewed streams brought life not just for humans but for the abundant wildlife as well. Deer ventured out from the cover of branches to sip from newly formed pools. Birds emerged in droves, calling out in joyous chatter. The scene painted a tender reflection of reciprocated gratitude. The villagers, blissfully unaware of the hidden battle in the labyrinth, gave thanks to the skies for the saving grace of the storm. Some might recall their ancestors' stories of thunder spirits who answered prayers in times of drought. Yet none would suspect a snow demon's role in that deliverance. Perhaps that was just as well. Certain truths could only be understood by those who walked the boundary between realms. Aduehi turned to Unihigilv. When next I summon a storm, your presence may not be welcomed by others of my kind. The old ways. He paused, seeming uncertain how to frame the issue diplomatically. Thunder and snow rarely partner. We are opposite seasons, after all. A slow smile parted Unihigilv's lips, tinged with the shadow of past loneliness. I realize the risk. Snow is typically a herald of winter, and winter for many feels like a frozen death. But if we have learned anything today, it's that alliances often transcend the boundaries we assume. He turned his gaze to the celebrating villagers. For now, they have rain, and the land breathes again. I will retreat to the upper peaks and hidden caverns that remain my domain. My power is best used in times of cold, but should you need me, should there be another threat to the balance, I will return. Adoui felt a pang of respect for his new ally. If ever we need your frost again, I will call, he promised. I hope our union remains a secret known only to us and the deep stone corridor. A faint swirl of white mist rose around Unikilve's feet, and in a graceful swirl of movement, he dissolved into flecks of snow carried on a passing breeze, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. Adoui stood alone beneath the canopy, the drizzle washing over him. The harmony of falling raindrops hummed in the distance, a lullaby for a land that had teetered so close to disaster. He closed his eyes, letting the comforting thunder in the sky caress his senses, and he smiled. His mission was not done. He spread his arms wide, summoning more clouds from the horizon, ensuring that the parched region would receive a proper, steady soak. Each crackle of distant lightning signaled fresh bursts of rain, saturating the fields, the valleys, and the mountain slopes. He pictured the farmland in a week's time sprouts breaking through the revitalized dirt. Families no longer haunted by thirst. He imagined creek beds filled with shimmering streams that sang lullabies each night. Nature, in all her splendor, would soon reclaim her rightful rhythm. Even as the storm raged on, Adoui remained vigilant. Some part of him listened for the presence of darkness, scanning the edges of perception for any tremor that disclosed Yawagvrage's escape, yet all was quiet beneath the drumming rain. The primal hunger was silenced, locked within its frozen tomb in the heart of the cave network. Neither thunder nor snow alone could have managed that feat. Their pact, unlikely as it was, had triumphed. When the rains finally began to lighten, Adoui drifted high into the clouds, guided by swirling updrafts. From that lofty vantage, he beheld a sight of wonder. A rainbow arching across the clearing skies, bridging the realm of mortals and spirits in a spectrum of shared hope. He glided along the edges of the retreating storm toward distant horizons, ever watchful and ready to intervene if any new threat arose. Below, the joyful cries of humans, animals, and all living things mixed with the hush of forest leaves, shimmering under the rainfall. Life stirred from dormancy, and the blessings of water made the air thick with the promise of abundance. The villagers danced in mud puddles, their hearts unburdened from fear. They spoke fervent prayers to the Great Spirit, offering compliments to the thunder for answering them in their dire hour. None but Adoui and Unihigilv would ever truly understand the battle that saved the land from ruin. It was the perfect irony, thunder and snow forging a secret alliance within the vow of nature's tapestry. Something intangible to mortal eyes, but woven into every raindrop that fell, every frozen crystal that formed in winter. The next time a late frost came unexpectedly, or a sudden winter storm gripped the mountains, Adoui would recall this day and he would wonder if perhaps his friend from the icy caverns had decided to pay the land a quiet visit. Ultimately, the pact they had forged was more than a rescue operation. It was a testament to the fullness and complexity of nature, where seemingly contradictory forces could behave as partners in sustaining life. It was also a lesson that even spirits, ancient and wise, had more to learn about unity, that the bridging of differences, be they seasonal or spiritual, could unleash powerful miracles. And so Adawihi soared on, his eyes scanning the softening sky. Droplets clung like jewels to the ends of his hair, lightly sparking with electrons. The battered fields below stretched out in renewed splendor, shining with rivulets of nourishing water. The land, once brittle and defeated, now exuded a humble gratitude. That night, families in the village and along the hills would gather around their fires, warming themselves as the cool air rolled in behind the storm. Old men would tell stories of how thunder had come as a blessing, accompanied, so legend might someday speculate, by a hidden frost that staved off a scorching dew. In time, a new generation would be raised on whispers of that miraculous rain, though many details might be lost or altered in retellings. Perhaps, centuries down the line, some version of the legend would speak of a mysterious partnership between a thunder spirit and a snow demon. Yet only the two who had lived it firsthand would know the truth of how it all came to pass beneath those ancient mountains. High above the land, as the sky began to clear toward dusk, Adawi hovered in place one last moment. He felt a faint stirring somewhere far below, not of darkness but of a gentle, cooling breeze, as if echoing a distant friend's farewell. He dipped his head in silent acknowledgement, a thunder spirit's gratitude to the ally he never expected. Then, with a rumble, Adawi summoned lightning to his side. In a flash, he ascended toward the vault of stars, leaving the rains behind to nourish the newly revived forests and fields. He left quietly, without farewell to the humans below. Their thanks had been heard. His purpose had been fulfilled. Though the villagers might never know the hidden drama that took place beneath their feet, they would wake to a nurtured earth and the sweet promise that storms would return in due season. The ephemeral dryness was banished, and for now at least the land was safe.